You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, we're joined by Alan Coleman, the founder and CEO of Sweepr. Alan, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rian.
Delighted to have you. Typical fashion of the show is you focus on three main areas: early influences, a couple of minutes to get to know you, and then the fun part, challenges, pivotal moments, where the real value comes. So, no different with you. I believe you grew up in Dublin. What was your early days on life like growing up in Dublin?
Fairly unremarkable, I would say. I grew up in North Dublin, fairly kind of middle class upbringing, I guess. Went to school in Belvedere, and I suppose the most relevant piece, I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background. My dad worked for Aer Lingus for his entire career. I didn't particularly demonstrate any entrepreneurial tendencies during my time in school or college. And what I did, though, I guess what was most formative is I ended up going and studying science in UCD, doing computer science and maths as a general degree. I wouldn't describe myself as excelling in either, but I did enough to get by. And then I did a postgraduate course in Kerrysford in a master's in business studies, which sort of set the framework for my career thereafter, where I always straddled that business meeting technology piece. So I was technologically conversant, but I had a good aptitude in mind for business challenges and opportunities. And so that was formative in how the jobs I would subsequently get and the way I would think about ultimately starting my own entrepreneurial journey.
You've mentioned that your parents aren't entrepreneurial, your dad being working for Aer Lingus, and you chose computer science and maths. Was there anyone that inspired you to get into computers? Were you playing with them from an early age? I guess my real question is, why that degree?
I was exposed to computers from early age. I had a VIC-20, I had a BBC Micro, I played Elite. I was also exposed to things that were maybe a bit geeky. Like I kind of straddled two sides. Like I could be geeky and I played rugby in the school team, right? So I was both those people. Like I would play Dungeons and Dragons on certain days and I'd be playing rugby on the school team on other days, right? So I always had that sort of interest in technology and imagination and fantasy and science fiction and that sort of stuff. So I always found nothing wrong with being interested in that, and yet doing what things would traditionally regard as being kind of blokey activities, you know.
Before we move away from this segment, a question I like to ask is around impact and influence. People can usually point to a number of small people that had an impact on their early life that's helped them become the person they are today. Close friend, acquaintance, teacher, close relative, distant relative. Any one, two, or three people spring to mind for you?
Yeah, I've been influenced by so many people. I would say my parents both brought certain different influences to me. My dad was a very bright guy and hardworking. My mother was tenacious, and like if she wanted something to be got, she would just move heaven and earth to get it. In college, I think I worked with John Mooney, who was the dean at the masters at Kerrysford at the time I was there. I always found him and his mindset very interesting and very awakening. I remember also, I can't remember his name, but he was a professor. He was a professor of economics. He taught in Kerrysford at the time, and I remember I really enjoyed economics with him. Like we at the time, not to age me, but we were debating the merits of the euro, right, and whether we would abandon the punt to go into the euro and what the economic implications of that might be. And I found that fascinating.
Interesting. Actually, I'd like to rewind the clock to the year 1999. You had just finished up 2 years at Morgan Stanley, reading from a screen here in case you see my eyes move backwards and forwards, and moved into a sales manager role at Michaela. Macalla, you spent 3 years there.
Mm-hmm.
What did sales teach you about people and business? Any key lessons or key takeaways from? And I know you had a sales director role then at Accenture afterwards as well.
Yeah, like so Morgan Stanley was my first job. Classic milk round investment banking role, straddled kind of trading floor and technology. That was sort of the role I had. Then it was the dot-com time. So I spent a couple of years in London, some time in New York, and decided I was quite keen to get back to Dublin. And this job in Macalla came up. And Macalla, they were doing at the time, well, the strapline was Corba-based financial frameworks, which Corba was a really early middleware. And basically they were effectively offering enterprise software to help investment banks move trading floor data off the trading floor into somewhere else, which at the time doesn't sound very remarkable now, but all these systems were proprietary and closed and data wasn't really meant to travel that way. I guess what my time in Macalla taught me, and sales in particular taught me, was that idea of working with a prospect or a client to explore the art of the possible, to explore the business value, to look at something that was effectively at the time was a piece of infrastructure. Like it wasn't the software, it wasn't like we didn't sell it as, we didn't sell it as with a single business case. Early on, we sold it as a piece of enabling infrastructure. So for example, we would do things, we did Europe's first WAP-based bank, right? Ulster Bank launched a WAP retail banking service. And I don't know if you recall what WAP was like, but it was rudimentary. It was like on feature phones, and it was just basically changing the menu pattern in feature phones fed by this WAP markup language, wireless, I don't even remember what it stands for now, wireless application protocol, I think. And it was such a skinny pipe, and so little data could come down it, and making something useful in the banking world. When you compare that to Revolut today, like it's laughable. Like it's like comparing Atari Tennis with some of the video games you get on PlayStation 5. Like it's just remarkable. We went on and then did real-time ticker tape updates on iPACs. Like so an iPAC, if you remember, which is a HP-based kind of early tablet or handheld tablet that would sit into a GSM sleeve with a SIM in the sleeve, running over, I'd say 9.6K, and it would flicker updates in real time off a trading floor feed. Like, and these things were just like technology showmanship. Yeah. They weren't really like underpinned by some fundamental way the technology would change that business model, but they were motivated to have the latest stuff, and so we sort of pitched on that. Now ultimately that business, as it rolled forward, we did find business cases and use cases that were a bit more concrete, particularly one in fact, the evolution of that business was we ended up doing a project with a bank in Holland to link a bank account with a phone with prepaid top-up, and it was, the phone was an incentive for people to open savings accounts. But the interesting piece of that puzzle was we could now affect SMS-based authorization for debits on a bank account and credits on an SMSC, the thing that allowed us, or not the SMSC, the billing engine to update the prepaid phone. And again, why that was very important was because everybody mostly used scratch cards and news agents to top up their phone. There was no electronic top up, right? Wow. So that was the business. But anyway, the whole journey with Macalla was very, very smart team, building really clever technology, probably struggled a little bit to find the kind of killer application of it. And that was, but what I learned was that process of working with customers and prospects to imagineer and to understand the art of the possible with the technology.
Interesting. Certainly interesting looking back. One of the things that you mentioned before you started talking was punt, and strangely enough, I actually carry around 10 punt in my wallet. I didn't know if I had it or not. I had a look.
That's a good night out back in my day, I'm telling
You wouldn't get much of it now, you wouldn't.
you.
2010, you founded Brightbill and
Yeah.
ended up selling that 6 years later. I talk about blind spots a lot. Things like, like road bumps that people run into, where if they didn't run into them, their growth could be like 2 or 4x or 6x what it currently is. Things like improperly onboarding people, not capturing best practices, not building the bench, not paying attention to lead generation. But I like to flip that on its head with you and touch on the opposite of that. What do you think, when done well, uh, done better than other businesses? What do you think that you did well at Brightbill, better than other businesses that contributed to the success and sale of that venture?
Uh, I think there's two things probably I'd point to as being like meaningful. One is it was quite a visual sale. Like we were selling a new way to conceive telecommunication bills, right? Now, I should say we didn't start with that. Like I started a business called Get It, Keep It, a consumer facing bill aggregation platform that I pivoted within 6 months to become Brightbill. So the whole journey of evolving what Brightbill would ultimately be took me two plus years before on that journey before, and there's the last 4 years of real hard execution that got us where we got to. When we knew what we wanted to sell, we sold it visually. We sold it based on, this is what your bill looked now to a carrier. It causes you all this problem. That it effectively, all technology is about ultimately about behavioral change, about eliciting a behavioral change in a customer, whether it's the timing of a message, the word of a message, the color you use, whatever's on the screen. All of this stuff, it's all about nudging our behaviors a little bit, towards in the direction that the provider or service provider wants. And the bill was that. It was a very, it was something that roughly 30% of people pay attention to on a monthly basis. So in terms of capturing your existing customer base, it's actually quite a platform that most organizations saw as a curse rather than a asset, because it would drive confusion, then drive calls, and then drive calls would drive operational expense. So we designed intuitive, intelligent bills that got ahead of issues that were in the bill. Identifying you're rolling off an early promotion, you were on holidays, blah, blah, blah. All the reasons that people get bill shock or are unsettled by the bill, we were trying to get ahead of it with the choice of words, the tone, the imagery, etc. So that's the first of the things. I think the fact that we sold a visual experience meant we weren't competing with features in our technology. The production of a bill is as old as a telecommunication company. Like it's 100 years plus old, right? And we said it's not a revenue collection moment, it's a customer communication moment. And when you pivoted that way, you kind of reframed the problem. People said, oh yeah, well, actually that makes perfect sense. And then we were the only real provider in the space for that sort of answer. The second thing I think we did well, which will sound a bit perverse and controversial today, was more because of the way that industry worked than anything else. We sold perpetual licenses with maintenance. We sold a traditional enterprise license software. The reason I point to that as being helpful to the company is that telecommunications is quite a concentrated industry. And building elongated cash flows off a SaaS-based revenue model is punitive. It's a great thing if you can build it, but it means that you basically have to mainline external capital in order to drive your growth until your cash flow and your cost base kind of meet equilibrium. And so Brightbill didn't have a funding model that way. We raised VC, but we also were doing very, very large enterprise deals that were very cash generative very quickly. So people would write large checks because I'm selling to very large organizations, and I'd say, it wouldn't be unusual maybe to get a 10 million euro check within the first 6 months of doing a deal with a large carrier. And that 10 million euro would fund the business effectively. And then I would drive services, and then I'd go on and do the next deal. Now, it made the whole thing lumpy, and it's an anathema to venture capitalists who don't like that model, want to generate elongated cash flows that are recurring and repeatable. But it was exactly the right model for that business at the time.
Interesting. Question around networking. So I see that you were the chairman of the ISA CEO Forum, a group of CEOs who meet regularly to listen to industry experts and discuss issues and whatnot. So what are your thoughts on networking and the role it plays in success? And then I guess in line with the ISA CEO Forum, what's your thoughts on reinforcement learning?
So networking is everything. People buy from people.
Mm-hmm.
The ISA forum is an example of people buying from people, but it is an example of the second thing you said, which is like learning the lessons of those who have gone ahead, gone in front of you. Where CEOs and people who with different experiences, or people living the same experiences, get an opportunity to share. Look, I ran into that tax issue opening in the States, or I hired this sales guy and that didn't work, but this is why it didn't work, et cetera, et cetera. So that sharing of what others have done is invaluable. And it's something CEOs don't do enough of. Like, every business that's starting today or has started recently is following in the footsteps of someone who's made the exact same mistakes as, or gone into the pitfalls ahead of them. And the easier thing is not to fall into the same pitfall, but it's to ask somebody who fell into it and say, how could I have avoided it? And then you'll get the answer, So it's something we in the Irish industry need to do a lot more of, sharing experiences, and also sharing, potential entry points, or sharing networks, or, not like in a much more, I think Irish CEOs are generally very generous when asked.
Agreed.
It's just a question of creating a forum where, those requests can be made and those questions can be asked and answered.
Why do you think it is that they don't put in the time?
I think everyone's super busy. It's hard to kind of carve it out, and everybody also has to see a lot, see value for it, right? So I think, to be honest, I think sometimes the forums are a little contrived, or getting that model completely right. So in terms of, I think to do it properly, you would have to kind of create a kind of concentrated experience where you match up, companies who express interest in things that they'd like to get better at or know more about, and also match it with people who saying, well, these are things I know about, and these are things, I'm good at. And I think sometimes in, get-togethers of an evening, whatever, it can sometimes be a bit haphazard, where I'm not aware that something, or that you have a network into somewhere that I need, and because I don't know it, I never ask. And I think that's probably something missing in the way in which we network. If we're, I think it's probably an opportunity for someone or some to try to find that a better pairing of experience.
Interesting. You're now the CEO and founder of Sweepr. Rather than me spend 30 seconds giving the 30-second commercial, why don't you take the mic? You'll do a much better job.
Sure. Well, Sweepr is a digital support platform for telecommunication customers. So it's basically a platform that enables telecommunication organizations to move more of their service and digital and interactions into a digital world, right? So, and to do that in a highly personalized way. So our observation about early forays into digital care or digital service is that it's generic and a bit impersonal, and it disenfranchises a lot of people who just are not technical and prefer to talk to a human. And what we recognized was that what a lot of digital care lacked was context. So it lacked context of who you are. It lacked context of what was happening in that moment. It lacked context of what had happened previously and who you were generally to the company. And so each interaction was like starting anew when you're talking to a bot, like a digital agent as opposed to a human agent. And if the transition of care is going to move into being a truly digital experience with a human layer to it, no doubt, that's never going to go away. But increasingly, more and more of the things we want to achieve can be handled very proficiently and very efficiently using digital technologies that are personalized and deal with you as an individual, not as a cohort or a generic, customer. So that's what Sweepr's platform basically allows these organizations to build these journeys, taking in all this context, so that each interaction you have, whether it's on a phone or over voice or through messaging, is tailored to you and your situation.
You did that very well, Alan. I'm not going to lie, I went onto your site and it took me a while to wrap my head around exactly what it was until I came across the 7 principles of personalization. And then with that, I kind of wrap my head around it. I'll leave a link below to your LinkedIn page, your website and stuff. But I have a question on those 7 principles of personalization, things like sentiment analysis, aptitude, customer circumstance, customer 360, query prompting, etc., etc., etc. Customer circumstance is the one I'd like to spend a minute or two on, because this one fascinates me. You have the ability to learn more about your customer, if they work from home, their working hours, potentially even what room they're working in. Can you talk me through, hopefully with an example of how this information can be useful to the provider?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is exactly why a digital platform can be very powerful, and particularly one that retains a memory of things. So let me give you an example. Let's say you were using a voice assistant to ask for care. So you would say, hey, Alexa, Netflix is buffering at the moment. What's going on? Our software would then, so the actual way, just to be completely technically accurate, you would say, hey, Alexa, talk to Virgin Media. And then Virgin Media said, how can I help? And you say, okay, I'm having problems with Netflix, it's buffering. So what our software then does in the background is it starts to run lots of tests. It checks the latency within the network. It starts testing the availability of Netflix as a service within your region. And in the building of that interaction, we could also include it. We also would do an inventory of the devices that are capable of streaming Netflix in your home. So we would know, a Samsung Q90 can stream Netflix. So can the Sony, which is up in the bed, upstairs or whatever, or sorry, the Sony TV or the phones. And we'd give that list and ask you, which of these devices are you currently, and you say, on the Samsung TV. At this point, we might say to you, is that TV in the living room? Or sorry, we'd say, which room is that TV in? And you would say, in the living room. We would retain that information. We'd remember that. So, and then we might also ask, might also note the time of this. So it's 7 p.m. in the evening. So now we have a data point that says, Rian watches, occasionally will stream a movie on Netflix at 7 p.m. on his Q90 Samsung, which is in the living room. So the next time we have an interaction and you say, I'm having an issue with my TV, we can replay to you, oh, is it the Q90 in the living room? And you go, yeah. But the reason why that's an important thing, it's a bit superficial on one level, but it's important because as a customer, it shows to you as a provider that I pay attention to what's important, and I'm trying to shortcut the care journey. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm gathering contextually relevant information to help me help you. But obviously it's not entirely altruistic. As in, I know that a little bit about you, and now I can start to tailor things that, well, you know what, Rian might like the fact that we have a special on Sky Movies, because I know he watches movies because he's told me he watches Netflix. So there's a kind of exchange of information where we build up a richer profile of the customer, but all with the purpose of predominantly serving them better, making them feel better about the provider, making them feel that they're known and respected. And also then they also know that the accuracy of things that might, say, increase that relationship or grow that relationship through share of wallet or other services will be done because it's contextually relevant. It won't be random and scattergun. And one of the biggest challenges around the like, people think organizations like telecommunication companies are desperate to move more and more of the interactions away from humans down digital channels. In fact, there's a whole cohort of people in those companies that want the exact opposite, because they know when you're on a call to a person, they can have that agent at the end of the script say, oh, are you interested in buying the fight this weekend? Like the sales channel of ancillary revenue that's driven through care and service is enormous. And they don't want to lose that by going down this digital channel, which has none of the nuance or none of the smarts that a person has, right? And so that's why the things we're bringing into the digital arena are materially important, because we can achieve the same things that a person can by designing these digital interactions in a personalized and highly interactive way.
I'm assuming then if you can't fix that Netflix problem, that it's beneficial to the provider because you've given them incredibly good information saying, you know, this is gone.
Well, what happens is one of two things. One, it is a network problem and I make some changes and I adjust it and Netflix stops buffering. Two, it's a Netflix issue. They're having a service outage and we've checked and it's out. So we'll tell you, you know what, it's not us or your network. Your network is perfectly fine, but Netflix is having some issues we're seeing. So we'll keep monitoring it, let you know when it's back. So that's the second thing. Or it's something we can't figure out. And what we say is, you know what, Rena, I'm not sure what's happening here, but I'm going to pass you to an agent, a human agent, and I'll make sure they get all of the context of what we've just done. So when that human agent picks up your issue, they're going, okay, Rian, so I see we've run the tests and we've tried the following things. And, okay, so it's none of the basic stuff. I'm going to have to do something else, or I'm going to have to send an engineer. So that way, the issue is the purpose of care is to fix the issue or take the issue from the customer's hands as quickly as possible. That's the purpose.
I like it. What's your favorite aspect of being a CEO founder?
Depends on what day you ask me. Some days I wish I was not CEO. I think so the thing I enjoy most about being the CEO of a company is two things. It's like, initially you set the vision for the company, you set the mission, you say, like, I have an aspiration, I think the world should work this way, let's try and see what we can do about doing that. And then what you do is you try to surround yourself with incredibly talented people. And effectively what you're quite quickly, after you've got to a certain point, the CEO's job is to create environments that enable those people to do their job. Because pretty much everybody who works for me is much, much, much better at their respective job than I could ever be, right? I've got better salespeople, I've got better financial people, better product people, better technology people, better delivery people, so, and my job is to try to get that team to work collegiately and to get roadblocks out of their way and to get the best out of them. You become kind of like a conductor. And I really enjoy doing that. I'm not always the best at it. Every day I'm learning something. I'm appreciating my own failings and foibles, but I enjoy that role.
3 questions there for you. The first one probably was the hardest one to answer, and it's what's your personal definition of success?
My personal definition of success is at any point. So when I'm going to narrow the scope of the answer, right? To say success in business versus success in life, just right. Yeah. So success in business is about at any point, viewing what you have at the moment as a sorry, 1 second, just got a call coming through. Viewing what you have at any point, viewing what you have in terms of business assets as like a hand of cards, and always being able to look back at the hand you had and saying, I played that as well as I could have, right? Doesn't mean that you'll always succeed, but you did your best with what you had, and you wouldn't make any different choices. And I view it that way. Like, I view that at any point in time, whether you're in a crisis, whether you're sailing high, there's an optimum way to play the cards you have. And you can make bad choices, and you can look back and say, yeah, I didn't do very well from that position. Or you can look back and say, no, I did quite well. I did everything I would have done. I wouldn't retake or replay any of those decisions.
Final question for you, Alan, before I let you go, is if you had the final decision-making power on adding a mandatory subject that's not on the curriculum to the secondary school curriculum, what would it be and why?
I would put, I don't know what I would call this, but I would want a mandatory subject that focused on imagination and challenging people to think differently about things and look at the world with different perspectives. So straightforward, like just dreaming up new ideas and doing new things, but probably more importantly, and particularly in today's age, the ability to step out of your normal way of looking at a topic or a subject and looking at it critically from a completely different perspective. Like, I give like a political example would be, like looking at the Muslim world through the eyes of somebody who lives in Lahore in Pakistan versus somebody who lives in Western Europe. Like, something that's so 180 that would just gives you a different perspective on how things should be thought about. And I think we all get locked into these kind of fairly blinkered ways of thinking, and I think we need to give our children much better skills in critical thinking and critical analysis, so that they don't always just believe what they're told.
That's a great answer, and it's the first time anyone ever has given that answer. Alan Coleman, founder and CEO of Sweepr, thanks for being my guest today. I've had a pleasure spending the last 35-40 minutes with you, but I'll leave links below to your LinkedIn, website, and all the other stuff wherever you're listening or watching this. But for today, thank you.
Thanks very much. A real pleasure.